My name is Maria Santos. I am 68 years old. Last winter, something happened to me. It changed my whole life forever. My own son took my hand. Then he left me behind. He left me in a nursing home. He did not look back. That morning felt cold and strange. My heart felt heavy and afraid. I lived in a small town. My house was old but warm. I lived there for 40 years. My husband built it with love. He died 7 years before that day. Since then, I lived there alone. I was lonely sometimes, that is true, but I still had my memories. Every morning I watered my flowers. Then I made tea and toast. I cleaned the little front room. Then I sat near the window. Sometimes I knitted small scarves. Sometimes I baked apple cake. My son Daniel lived nearby. He was 42 years old. He had a wife, Helen. They had one little daughter. My granddaughter Emma was 10 years old. She was my small, bright light. She came every Sunday afternoon. We played cards and drank juice. She always hugged me very tightly. She always said, "I love you." I smiled and kissed her hair. I said, "I love you more." Daniel was kind when younger. He laughed often and spoke softly. But later he started changing. His eyes looked tired every day. He came less often than before. Sometimes weeks passed with no visit. When he came, he checked his phone. He looked busy and far away. I asked, "Are you all right, Daniel?" He said, "Yes, just tired, Mom." Helen was polite, but always cold. She never stayed for long talks. She stood near the door often. She looked around my house quietly. One afternoon I served fresh soup. Daniel did not even touch it. He said, "Mom, money is hard." I listened and stayed very still. He lost his job 2 months earlier. Bills were growing bigger every week. I said, "Take what you need." He shook his head and then Helen spoke she said, "This house is too big." I looked at her and said, I did not answer that moment. Daniel looked down at the table. He said nothing to stop her. That night I could not sleep. The house felt different and unsafe. A week later, Daniel came again. He smiled, but his smile looked weak. He held some papers in one hand. He said, "Mom, sign these, please." I asked, "What are these papers?" He answered, "Just bank forms, Mom." I looked at the first page. The words felt small and confusing. I said, "I want more time." His face suddenly became hard. He said, "Do you trust me?" I felt pain inside my chest. I whispered, "Of course, my son." Still, I did not sign. He stood up very quickly then. His chair made a loud sound. He said, "Forget it for now." Then he walked outside in anger. From my window I watched him. Helen waited inside their car. She asked something through the window. He hit the steering wheel hard. I felt fear for the first time. Something was very wrong now. 2 days later, Emma visited alone. Her small face looked pale and worried. She hugged me and started crying. I said, "What happened, sweetheart?" She whispered, "Please do not go." My hands started shaking at once. I bent down and asked softly, "Go where, Emma? Tell Grandma." She looked at the kitchen door. Then she spoke in I heard Mom and Dad talking. They want to send you away." My mouth went dry that second. I said, "Send me where, dear?" She said, "To a care home. Mom wants your house, Grandma." I sat down very slowly. The room moved around my eyes. I asked, "Did Daniel say that?" Emma nodded and wiped her tears. She said, "Dad was very quiet. Mom said it was better." I held her little hands tightly. I could barely breathe that moment. I said, "Thank you, my angel." She said, "Please do not leave." That night, rain hit my windows. I sat awake until early morning. I looked at old family pictures. I touched my husband's smiling face. I whispered, "What should I do?" Only silence answered me back. The next morning, Daniel arrived early. He carried my suitcase from upstairs. I stood near the living room. I said, "Why is that downstairs?" He avoided my eyes again. He said, "You need more care." I answered, "I care for myself." He rubbed his forehead and sighed. He said, "Just for a while. It will be easier for everyone." I asked, "Everyone or just Helen?" His face turned red with shame. Helen stepped in behind him then. She said, "Please stop making trouble." I stared at her in disbelief. My own home felt foreign now. I said, "This is my house." She crossed her arms and frowned. Daniel spoke before I could continue. He said, "Mom, please come peacefully." I looked at my son's face. I searched for the boy inside. I remembered his first school day. He cried and held my dress. I remembered his fever at night. I stayed awake beside his bed. I remembered working 2 jobs daily. I wanted him safe and strong. Now he stood before me, cold. He would not meet my eyes. I asked one final question. "Did you plan this together?" Helen answered before Daniel could speak. She said, "Yes, it is necessary." Daniel whispered, "Mom, please understand." But I did not understand anything. He drove me across the town. No one spoke during that ride. I watched my street disappear slowly. My chest felt empty and broken. At the nursing home entrance, a nurse opened the glass door. She smiled kindly and said, "Welcome, Mrs. Santos. Come inside." I wanted to run away then, but my legs felt weak. Daniel carried my bag to reception. He signed papers very quickly. I said, "How long will I stay?" He answered, "Only some weeks, Mom." I asked, "Will you visit tomorrow?" He paused too long before speaking. Then he said, "I will try." That answer cut me deeply. I touched his sleeve one moment. I said, "Please do not leave." He looked at the floor sadly. Then Helen called from outside. He pulled his arm away gently. He said, "I have to go." I watched him walk to the door. He never turned around once. When the door closed behind him, I felt something inside me break. A nurse named Clara led me upstairs. She spoke with a warm voice. She said, "Your room is small, but we will help you settle." My room had one bed only. There was one chair and dresser. A little window faced the garden. Still, it did not feel mine. That first night, I cried quietly. I did not want others hearing. The woman next door heard anyway. She knocked softly before entering. She was tall and silver-haired. Her name was Mrs. Green. She sat beside me without speaking. Then she offered me a tissue. She said, "Your family left you?" I nodded and looked away. She sighed and touched my shoulder. She said, "Mine did the same." The next days moved very slowly. Breakfast came early every morning. Then medicine carts rolled by. Then television played loud shows. Some residents slept all afternoon. Some waited near the front door. I started hating that front door. It promised hope, then gave nothing. Each day I waited for Daniel. Each day he never arrived. I asked the nurse every evening, "Did my son call today?" Clara always checked the desk kindly. Then she shook her head slowly. After 1 week, I stopped asking. Hope was hurting me too much. Mrs. Green became my first friend. Then I met Mr. Lewis. He told funny stories at lunch. He made many people laugh. There was also Anna from room 12. She painted birds with soft colors. Little by little, I changed. I spoke more and cried less. Still, nights remained very painful. My heart returned to my house. I missed my kitchen and flowers. I missed Emma most of all. One afternoon, Clara brought a letter. She said, "This came for you." The writing looked small and round. I knew Emma had sent it. Inside, there was one short note. There was also a tiny key. The note said, "Grandma, I'm sorry. Please trust Mrs. Rivera next door." Mrs. Rivera was my old neighbor. She had known me for years. Under Emma's note, more words appeared. "Dad and Mom sold your house." My hands started shaking again. The room became dark around me. "Sold my house? Without my permission?" I read the line again. Clara saw my face change quickly. She said, "What is wrong?" I gave her the little note. She read it and looked shocked. She said, "We need help now." Then she called the office phone. That evening, Mrs. Rivera arrived there. She looked angry and very worried. She held a folder near her chest. She said, "I feared this." We sat in a quiet room together. Clara closed the door behind us. Mrs. Rivera opened the folder carefully. Inside were copied papers and photos. She said, "Helen visited me yesterday. She wanted your old mail." I said, "Why would she?" Mrs. Rivera took a deep breath. "She thought I knew nothing," she said. but I watched everything closely. She showed me one terrible paper. It had my name signed below. I stared at the signature there. It looked like mine, but strange. I whispered, "I never signed this." Mrs. Rivera nodded very firmly. She said, "I know, Maria. This signature was copied badly." My stomach twisted with fear. My own son had done this? Then Mrs. Rivera showed another photo. It showed movers outside my house. The date was from last Tuesday. I was already inside the home. She said, "Emma gave me information. That brave child wants to help." I covered my face and cried. Clara handed me fresh tissues quietly. I kept saying, "Why? Why? Why?" No answer could heal that pain. The nursing home director called a lawyer. He came the next morning. He listened to everything carefully. Then he asked many simple questions. I told him about the papers. I told him about that drive. I told him about Emma's warning. I told him about Daniel's silence. The lawyer said, "We can fight." My heart beat fast with fear. I asked, "Can I really win?" He replied, "Yes, I believe so." For the first time in weeks, I felt a small flame inside. It was not joy or peace. It was strength waking up. 2 days later, Daniel came suddenly. He looked tired and unshaven. He stood near my room door. He whispered, "Mom, can we talk?" I stayed seated by the window. I said, "You may speak." He walked in very slowly. His eyes looked red and swollen. He said, "I know everything now." I answered, "So do I." He sat across from me quietly. Then tears filled his eyes. He said, "Helen lied to me. She told me you agreed." I stared at him in anger. I said, "Do not lie again." He covered his face with both hands. Then his shoulders started shaking. He said, "I was weak, Mom. I wanted money and peace." That truth hurt more than lies. At least he spoke honestly now. He continued, "She made false papers. I signed things without reading closely." I asked, "And leaving me here?" He closed his eyes in shame. He said, "I told myself lies. I said it was temporary only." I stood up with trembling legs. My voice came out very cold. "You still left me here," I said. "You still took my home." He nodded and began sobbing softly. He said, "I know, Mom." He reached toward my hands slowly. This time, I stepped back. I said, "Love needs courage, Daniel. You chose fear over love." He cried harder after those words, but I could not comfort him. For too long, I protected him. Now I had to protect myself. The lawyer worked very fast then. The house sale was stopped quickly. Because of the false papers, the buyer withdrew from the deal. Helen left town 3 days later. Police wanted to question her. Daniel offered me many apologies. He brought flowers and fruit baskets. He said, "Please come home, Mom." But home was not simple anymore. I visited my house 1 week later. Mrs. Rivera came with me. The front room smelled strange and empty. Many things were already gone. My husband's chair was missing. My blue dishes were missing too. I touched the kitchen wall gently. Then tears ran down again. Daniel said, "I will fix everything." I answered, some things stay broken. After that day, I made my choice. It was the hardest choice ever. I did not return to Daniel's care. I did not live alone again. Instead, I stayed at the home. But now I stayed by choice. That may sound very strange, yet listen to my heart. In that place, I found people. I found pain, but also kindness. Mrs. Green became like a sister. Anna painted my flowers for me. Mr. Lewis made me laugh again. Clara treated me with true respect, and Emma visited every weekend. She ran straight into my arms. She said, "Grandma, forgive Dad someday." I kissed her forehead very softly. I said, "Maybe one day, sweetheart," but trust returns very slowly. Daniel still comes every Thursday. He sits and talks with me. Sometimes we drink tea together. Sometimes we sit in silence. He is trying to change now. I can see that much clearly. But a mother's heart remembers everything. Love remains, yet pain remains too. I planted small flowers by my window. They bloom in morning light. When I water them each day, I feel calm again inside. I lost my house that winter, but I found my voice there. I learned something very important. Even old hearts can become strong. Family can break your heart deeply. Still, you can stand again. You can cry and still continue. You can hurt and still live. Now I tell my story openly. I do not hide anymore. Maybe someone needs these words today. Maybe someone feels alone right now. If that person is you, listen. Your life still has great value. Your age does not erase you. Your tears do not weaken you. And your silence helps no one. Speak before it is too late. My son sent me away once, but he did not end me. I am still here, breathing softly. I am still here, loving carefully. And I am still here, waiting, not for rescue, but for peace. What would you do in my place? Tell me in the comments. If you like this story, please like, comment, share, and subscribe.